the real rock, and we played the whole theme song and still hoping. And yeah, I don't know what happened. We got the promo that is coming on. All right, so we're waiting on the turn of Marlon Hill with the People's Politics coming up in. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Hope that's a turn of Marlon Hill. Let's go cold turkey. Let's see what's happened. Is this the last attorney?
This is the last attorney. Thank you, sir. But my phone had to be powered up. Thank you, listeners, for the short delay here. We know that we're usually on time here at 4 p.m. on the People's Politics here on Caribbean Rhythms. Hopefully, you're starting to enjoy the cool breeze of the holiday season. I was taking a little break last week. The 3 at 3 hosts dived into their conversation right here on the program. As you may know, this weekend we are watching or viewing the memorial or the funeral procession of former leader of Cuba, Fidel Castro, who is going to be laid to rest tomorrow in Santiago de Cuba, which is on the eastern side of the island of Cuba, which in fact has a number of persons who are of Cuban descent, but who are also of Haitian and Jamaican descent, and many other Caribbean islands who have traveled to Cuba over the years. I wanted to kind of just say to the listeners, and many people may not even see this in the context at times, that Cuba is actually in the Caribbean Sea, Eddie. Don't you recall that?
Yes, yes.
And it's definitely part of the Caribbean culture and Caribbean geopolitics. But when you look at it in the context of the United States, people tend to forget that Cuba has this connection with the Caribbean. And in fact, Eddie, what I also see happening is that whether you are Cuban or Cuban descent or you are non-Cuban, everyone seems to be judged on their position or their relationship to Cuba as to whether or not they hate Fidel, despise Fidel, love Fidel, like Fidel, or empathize Fidel. It's almost like a Fidelometer, as I would put it, meaning that where you fit on the Fidelometer could determine what your politics may be. And I take the view, I say to the listeners, especially for those of us who are non-Cuban, and some of our listeners are Cuban, who are or married to other Caribbean people, that we really need to give the Cuban people, I think, Eddie, some space to express whatever it is that they feel on the Fidelometer, right? Because that's their country, right? If in Jamaica there was a Fidel who happened to have a revolution and oppressed your family, or even ordered your family member to be killed, or suppressed a family member who was a part of the media, or expelled a family member who was a member of some sort of religious organization, how would you feel? Mm-hmm. And then you had to leave Jamaica. Right. And abandon your home and abandon your business, or even leave a family member behind. How would you feel on the Fidelometer? And what if that was Barbados? Or what if that was Trinidad and Tobago? How would you feel? So I think that the Cuban people deserve the respect and dignity, the space to feel whatever it is that they wish to express, whether in Cuba or right here on the streets of South Florida or in Miami, or Coyote, or wherever they live, how they feel about the passing of this person who had such an impact on the island. However you view it, positive or negative, and the impact that he had or is continuously having based on the revolution also had an impact on the broader Caribbean, because many of the Caribbean countries, both positive and negative, were places of refuge for people that left Cuba. And many people that left Cuba went to Jamaica. I mean, the people that left Cuba and went to places like Puerto Rico and Barbados, right? For whatever reason, Eddie, there are persons that moved from Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, to go to Cuba for other reasons, for education, for medical care, and whether or not Fidel had an impact, positive or otherwise, on that will be will be judged. But let's not be mistaken that there are many people that were impacted in severe ways, negative ways, because of the revolution that happened in Cuba. And I think that the space that we need to create, we need to make sure that the Caribbean region is not left out of the equation, Eddie. Follow me very closely, out of the discussion of what happens in the future of Cuba, because we do have many of our listeners have extended family members or direct family members who are of Cuban descent, or who are of Caribbean descent that went to Cuba, and have family members who were born in Cuba. And that includes myself. I'm just learning over the last few years that my paternal grandmother was from Cuba and met my grandfather, and then they went back to Jamaica, and there goes the history, right? Mm-hmm. So I have no understanding or the connection of what's happening in Cuba. My aunt, Rosie, has been to Cuba on many occasions on various cultural art exchanges where there's commonality in the cultural history, expression, music, food, visual arts, and otherwise that's distinctly Caribbean, Eddie. Mm-hmm. And many people forget that the Cuban culture and many elements of Cuban culture, they just happen to speak Spanish, but it's the same cultural experience like many other Caribbean islands, but you don't hear those stories sufficiently enough right here in South Florida, because the politics of the Fidelometer supersedes any of those common discussions that we could have with regards to the experience that we have with Cuba. So I am encouraging the listeners to pay very closely to what is going to be happening after Fidel is laid to rest and the sun rises tomorrow. The revolution is still in place. Some of those human rights, which many of us enjoy here in the United States and enjoy in the other countries that we're from, are not fully enjoyed in Cuba, right? So the irony and the dichotomy of the positive and negative things that we may view as to what's happening on this Fidelometer is something that will be debated for decades, but the impact of what happens on that island directly also impacts what is happening here in South Florida because of the movement of the numbers of people and the infusion of culture that came from that Caribbean island called Cuba here in South Florida. And it's not something that we can ignore just because we are not of Cuban descent or don't speak Spanish or don't know much about what's happening in that island. But let it be known right here on this program, The People's Politics, that Cuba is inextricably attached not only to the Caribbean region, but also here in South Florida, and is not something that we can ignore just because we are not directly impacted by our own family, personal, business, or religious experience of what is happening there on the island. So I wish them the best with making sure that whatever happens, it's peaceful, and that they will give them the respect for whatever they express publicly, privately, or in social media, and the dignity to be able to deal with these emotions that they have wherever they fall on the Fidelometer of how they feel, why they want to feel, where they want to feel about what is happening there on that island. They deserve at least just that, if in fact you had the same experience on your own island. So that's it for the People's Politics. Eddie, have you started your Christmas shopping yet?
Shopping? Oh, you're supposed to shop? I was just drinking and eating. Oh, you're supposed to shop.
Your punch of cream and your
yes,
and your black cake.
That's what I was doing. Oh, okay. Thanks for telling me, man.
That's a memo.
Okay. All right.
We're wishing all the listeners, People's Politics is going to be live on WPLG Local 10 tomorrow as a part of the roundtable for this week in South Florida. Please make sure that you listen in or tune in on Channel 10, 11:30 a.m. We'll be talking a little bit more about what I discussed today with regards to Cuba and the Trump transition and all else that's happening in the world of public affairs. So that's it for the People's Politics this week. Make sure that you tune in and join us here on Caribbean Rhythms 3 at 3 every Saturday 4 p.m. right here on WHIM 1080 AM. Brought to you as always by the law firm of Hamilton, Miller and Berthasel. Check us out at hamiltonmillerlaw.com or give us a call at 305-379-3686.
All right.
More time, my friend.
Catch up with you. Attorney Marlon Hill, the People's Politics, right here on 3 at 3 Caribbean Rhythms. Eddie Cleveland, Jillian. Every Saturday at 4 o'clock.